Chair, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Good morning to all those participating in today's committee hearing on license and inspections, and for those who are listening from the general public. As I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcements be made at the beginning of every council session and committee hearing, holding remote public hearings as followed. Due to the current public health emergency, city council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I note that the hour has come. Our clerk for today is Mr. Brazel. Would you please call the roll to take attendance? And I'd like to remind the members that are in attendance here today to indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on the screen as you speak. Mr. Brazel.
Councilmember Alan Dom.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Present.
Councilmember Mark Squilla.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Present.
Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson. Councilmember David O.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr. Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson. Mr. Chair, I'd just like to note that we are joined by Councilmember Derek Green.
I'm also here present.
Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present and the hearing is now called to order. I also would like to recognize Councilmember Green, who is not a member of this committee, who is joining us here because he has some official business and legislation in front of us. And I want to thank all our members for attending the hearing. Councilman Green, we're going to start off with the two bills that are before yours, but would you like to be recognized at the opening of the meeting here, or prior to reading your bill?
Well, for the sake of time, I can make an opening comment now because I know you do have two other bills, and I anticipate there's a number of witnesses that'll be a somewhat long day. So if I can make some opening comments now, and that will help to move the process along for today's hearing. Okay.
Well, the chair recognizes Councilmember Green for some brief words.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill, I want to thank the committee for hearing this bill today. Bill number 210685 deals with an issue that is very important to citizens and all of us as policymakers in the city. Deals with the issue of our school buildings, making sure that our school buildings are safe, not only for our children, but also for all those that work in those buildings. You know, we've gone through a very challenging time over the past 19 months where, you know, children and those that work in our schools had to do things remotely, although we did have some essential workers in the buildings trying to make those buildings safe. But during that time period, there was various perspectives that I asked in reference to what the status of asbestos is occurring in our school buildings. This is an issue that's been going on for some time. As many people know, a few years ago, we learned of a teacher in particular, I won't provide her name for the record, who was diagnosed with mesothelioma, and she spent many years working at Meredith and Nebringer schools in our city and was diagnosed with that cancer, which is directly connected to asbestos. And so this is an issue that we've been dealing with for so many years. I know from my own perspective, having a mother taught in the school district for about 31 years, 26 of those years at Alny High School, dealt with the issue of asbestos at her school. And she never ceases to remind me of the challenges that caused for her and her coworkers at Alny dealing with asbestos, as well as trying to provide the best educational environment for the young people at Allen High School. And me, on even another personal level, my son, who attends a school district school, also dealt with asbestos in his school. And so this is an issue that impacts all of us. Impacts me personally as the son of a retired school teacher and also the parent of a child in the district. So we need to take additional steps to address this issue. During the pandemic, the school district talked about addressing asbestos, but then when we had to return back to school on August 31st, there were a number of schools that had significant asbestos issues, in particular, Masterman, SLA Beaver, and others. And then the actual day when I introduced this bill, we heard about issues of mold at Frankfurt High School. So we've got to a point now where people have some real issues and concerns in the capacity of the district to address these issues in our schools. And so we as a city have the responsibility of making our buildings safe. And so through today's legislation, it brings the city into that role of addressing asbestos and mold. I know the administration has some concerns on the effective date of this bill, and I'm willing to work with the administration on a new effective date. But my goal, and I hope the committee will support not only the amendment that was circulated on this bill, but vote the bill out of committee so that way we can continue to work with the administration to address the issues. I have had conversations with the school district. I wanted to work with the school district as well, but we need to take a higher role and perspective as a city and making sure that our schools are safe so that we don't have children whose parents worked in school buildings concerned about their parents' future, and also parents who have children that attend our schools don't have concerns about their future as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, council member, and I know you were teed up to speak, but formally, I'm going to ask the clerk to please read the numbers of the bills that are going to be heard in our committee today.
Bill number 210674, an ordinance amending Chapter 9-4400 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Responsible Business Owner Operations, to revise what constitutes nuisance behavior, expand business owner liability, and expand potential mitigation measures, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 210775, an ordinance amending Chapter 9-4400 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Responsible Business Operations, to expand property owner liability under certain terms and conditions. And Bill number 210685, an ordinance amending Subcode A, the Philadelphia Administrative Code of Title IV, the Philadelphia Building Construction and Occupancy Code of the Philadelphia Code, by amending Section A-703, entitled Special Certificate of Inspection, to enhance building safety requirements for educational occupancies, all under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Purcell. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses that we have here today, everyone has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this is a public hearing and it is being recorded. Because the hearing is a public hearing, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the hearing, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments that they may have for witnesses, I will note for the record that at this time we will be using the chat feature that is available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be for this purpose. Before I call any witnesses for our first bill, does any other members wish to make any comments regarding any other ordinances that we have here? I will certainly start off by making some comments because the first two bills, I am the lead sponsor of the two bills, and the bill number 210671, 210775. All right, the goal of the nuisance business legislation is simply to address problems with large commercial parking lots that have become places where nuisance behavior has occurred along Aramingo Avenue and in the northeast parking lots. Parking lots turned into large gathering places where people play loud music, loiter, and prepare for racing through business lots and along public streets. I've been receiving calls for many years about this, and the frustration and the safety concerns are at its highest level. I know some council members that are on this committee have also had public hearings and put together some public discussions with our police department and L&I to try to address these issues. But we are at a loss. All right, this is why this legislation is crafted and introduced today. Businesses have largely washed their hands of assisting us in handling these issues. Their position is that they are not responsible for their properties after hours. While it is true that police can and should assist business owners in determining problematic behavior, which they have, by the way, and I've been a part of those conversations, right, with owners of these properties, with owners of the businesses collectively together to try to address these issues, pre-pandemic, by the way, so for several years. These are private properties, and the police can't remove anybody without help. They don't have the authorization to do so. Further, with modest investments in signing, speeds calming, light and security, we can deter these gatherings from taking place, which will help ensure that the police resources can be used in a different way. Finally, we are talking about applying these requirements to all businesses. We are talking about requiring them of businesses whose properties are a habitual problem, who become a nuisance status. Right? We are using a mechanism in the process that has been in place for some time. The police can make a recommendation based on their knowledge of what is happening in a neighborhood. That recommendation goes to L&I, and L&I can require action by the business. This is just one more tool that is narrow in scope and is absolutely certainly responsible. That said, I understand that a colleague of mine has some concerns out of respect and unintended consequence. All right, we are going to hear testimony on these two bills. All right, from people. All right, I told you my experience with them as a district council person. I told you my experience working with other council members. I told you my experience working with businesses and owners of these large properties, trying to solve this problem that has yet to be resolved. So I'm going to hold these bills, all right, until we make effort to resolve their concerns. We're going to hear testimony, though, first. All right, so people know the large scope of the consequences and the nuisance that has become in a lot of various different levels to the community and the people at large. So I wanted to start with that. And clerk, would you please call our first witness for bill number 210674, please?
Matthew White.
Good morning.
Good morning, good morning, Mr. White. Thank you for being here. Would you please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Yes, my name is Matthew White, and I serve as an advisor to Police Commissioner Outlaw. Good morning, Chairman, other members of the Committee of Licenses and Inspections, and Councilmember Green. First, on behalf of Commissioner Outlaw, thank you for allowing the Police Department the opportunity to voice its opinion on bills number 210674, as it is proposed to be amended, and bill number 210775, relating to responsible business operations. As I'm sure many of you recall, the Police Department worked with Councilperson Bass in the development of this code section and fully supported its passage several years ago. As such, the PPD also supports the proposed amendments to 94400 to help hold business owners accountable, to allow or do nothing to prevent loud music from cars and other vehicles that routinely assemble in their private parking lots. The noise that these type of gatherings creates undermines the quality of life for those individuals residing in the surrounding area, and also creates a nuisance for our neighbors in New Jersey when these gatherings occur along the waterfront. As such, it's a large and widespread problem, and we certainly appreciate the efforts of Chairman Heenan to address the issue. That said, I also need to mention there's some hurdles that we're going to have with enforcement. As we know, 94400 is intended to compel owners of commercial properties to address the nuisance activities of their customers or other persons within the proximity of their premises. It is the duty of business owners to address these issues. To hold these companies accountable, we issue low-level disorderly type violations to the actual offenders. We then notify the business property owners of the violations with the expectation that they will work with the police department to take corrective action and come into compliance. If they fail to abate the nuisance behavior, then the matter can escalate to the Department of License and Inspections, where a cease operations order is possible. The key to this process is the underlying citations given to the individual offenders committing the nuisance behavior. While Section 12-1126 is the appropriate offense to cite the offenders for, this offense is predicated against the individual rather than the vehicle per se. What that means is that the officers need to actually hand the offenders a code violation notice. And in these parking lot settings where this conduct is occurring, once the police arrived, oftentimes people flee and scatter. It can be a chaotic scene. So I want to be clear and manage expectations that the police department cannot risk lives and property to pursue vehicles for this type of offense. It doesn't mean that we can't do enforcement. It just means that we need to be tactical and coordinated in the way that we do them. To overcome this hurdle, we would recommend also amending Section 12-1126 of the code to tie the offense to the vehicle itself. Vehicle owners are responsible for how their vehicles are operated, similar to the theory behind the red light photo camera program. So we would welcome amendments to 12-1126 to allow the violation of playing loud music to be handed to the vehicle operators or mailed to the vehicle owners. This would allow us to increase enforcement without making actual physical stops at the time of occurrence. With regards to the property owners' efforts to mitigate nuisance behavior, we support identifying additional efforts these businesses can take to mitigate the nuisances. We understand that the bill number 210674 suggests such measures as the installation of speed bumps, security cameras, and other measures. The camera technology will certainly aid us in the enforcement process. And while we can identify the vehicle owners from their license plates, the vehicle owners may not be the actual offenders. All this said, we support the premise of ensuring the nuisance behavior is mitigated by the use of the measures outlined in the legislation, but we would consider it a first step. We would welcome amendments to 12-1126 of the code to allow the violation of playing loud music to be handed to the vehicle operators or mailed to the vehicle owners. This would allow us to increase enforcement without the risk associated with making the actual stops at the time of occurrence. Also, we are trying to compel shop and business owners to control the activities on their properties. But to use this legislation, we need to issue a certain number of CBNs to the actual offenders before we can approach the business or parking lot owners. Being able to send vehicle owners CBNs for these violations reduces the need for officers to actually make the stops on these low-level offenses. This would be consistent with other efforts we are doing to reduce the number of stops for low-level quality of life offenses. This concludes my testimony, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. White. I just have a couple quick questions, and I want to recognize Councilman Swilla. So what are the common areas where drag racing is empty parking lots take place?
Well, I think you hit it, Councilman. We see it a lot along the Delaware Avenue and Aramingo corridors in South Philly as well, and some of these open stretches in the Northeast.
Right. And can you give us an idea of how many speeding and illegal drug sales reports the police department gets in areas where drag racing is an issue?
Unfortunately, I didn't come prepared with any statistics, but I'm happy to submit that to our folks to get you an answer.
Okay. Look, I'm pretty sure there's a direct correlation. So let's discuss that as, you know, because we're holding the bill, right? And this has been a collaborative effort for years and wish to continue that. So there's some of the things that I'd like to ask and that we pull together, and additionally, would there be any hindrances to enforce this ordinance if there could be an elaborate, you know, would there be hindrance in enforcing these? I think you had mentioned that, you know, some of the cameras and other mitigation effects would actually help. Could you elaborate on that and how this ordinance would help enforcing?
Yeah, so I think this ties in with, you know, hopefully if there could be an amendment to the actual code section regarding the loud music violations themselves, where instead of having to actually get a hold of the person operating the vehicle in a situation where, again, people are, you know, emotions are running high, people may be trying to run away from the, you know, from the officers. If we can simply identify the vehicles involved and then send those violation notices to the vehicle owners, that would be extremely, in fact, necessary to establish the conduct that we could then attempt to work with the business owners in relation to.
That's wonderful. Thank you for your input. Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla, who I'm going to say, you know, for the record, has been experiencing the exact same issues as I have, because our districts, although they don't overlap, they split some of these large parcels of properties that we're discussing in such a way where it has become an extreme safety issue, nuisance issue, and, you know, uprise almost in our neighborhoods at different times. Chair recognizes Councilman Squill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. White, for being here. Not sure if you're aware of it, but we have introduced legislation to use the technology to measure sound and also take pictures, sort of like they're using in Paris and in New York. We just introduced that a couple weeks ago, waiting to have a hearing. And the reason for that was for the same purpose that you mentioned, was to not engage the individuals, but then to be able to record the loud noises, the sounds, measure those sounds, take pictures of those vehicles, then have it reviewed by the authorities, and then distribute these violations in the mail. Would that be something that you guys would support? Because you can't be every place every time. As we know, these incidents, we even get complaints from Jersey saying that these boom cars that are setting up in these open lots and down along the river are actually so loud that in Jersey they're complaining over to us. Have you received those same concerns? And can you answer if this would make it easier to enforce this illegal behavior?
Thank you, sir. Yes, I have certainly heard the complaints from across the river, as well as from the from our neighborhoods. But what I would say is that as a general matter, I think the police department welcomes any opportunity to engage in less direct engagement for low-level offenses, in terms of a hands-on situation where we have to get people at the exact moment that they're engaged in the behavior. I think you see this across a number of initiatives that the department's undertaken recently, including some, you know, modified quality of life enforcement that we're piloting, as well as you know, our work on the driving equality bill that was recently passed. So we are trying to step away from this direct engagement. I can't comment specifically on, say, I generally just don't have a working understanding of the noise meters and recording the sound specifically that you alluded to with the cameras and the other bill. What I would say is that in this particular case, we had asked for and are, you know, interested in the use of the code section under the 1200 series that allows for the citation to be based upon hearing sound within a certain distance, 25 feet, as opposed to actually needing to use the equipment. So certainly not downplaying the equipment or the cameras or anything in that bill, but I'm not familiar with it enough to offer position one.
No, I think that is great. And I also think that, as we work through this process and are going to have a public hearing, we would like to work with you on modifications of that code, because it's really important that if we could engage and then enforce without the chasing or other things that have seem to be maybe a little more dangerous, and then these vehicles receive these fines in the mail. After so many fines, just like the red light cameras and just like the speed cameras, they're able to address and issue violations to the vehicle. Now, if they say they weren't driving, well, somebody was driving their vehicle. So their vehicle is being used for this type of activity. And we want to make sure that when we do this, it's something that would be not only supported by the police department, I know it will be supported by the neighbors, because they're the ones who are dealing with this day in and day out. And what happens is it's not only a public nuisance problem where it's loud noises, but we have these also vehicles that have modified exhaust systems. And, they are also illegal, but yet you're not chasing them around the street. This would also be able to measure them and take pictures of those vehicles to help us then enforce what the noise that they really provide to disturb the residents. But also they, sometimes when there's a large majority of them, they drive erratically. And, it causes a safety issue and a danger issue. So, I'd be willing to and looking forward to working with you as we progress on different legislation. But I think this is important because this could actually help our business owners. This actually could give them an idea of maybe, maybe I'll add or ask to have one of these cameras in my parking lot. So therefore, I'm not a nuisance, and I could then help to enforce these loud noise violations that come with it. So I think it could be a win-win. We're looking forward to working with you on that legislation and on this legislation, because we know something has to be done and we have to figure it out. And this gives us opportunities to do so. So thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to working with you on this legislation and on the introduction of the sound and cameras to send violations in the mail to people who illegally ride these vehicles and disobey our noise ordinances. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Squilla. And, for the record, I don't think anybody of this committee or any other of my colleagues would ever suggest or recommend that, somebody from the police department go chase somebody, down in the vehicle. That would truly be unsafe. But this is all about the prevention, all right, of, public safety. This is about the measures that could take place prior to having issues of large gatherings and illegal activity and incredible nuisance of loud noise. I too, border our district, Councilman Squills and myself border the Delaware River, and I hear from, we had meetings with the captains in our district and the community, about, sound over in Jersey, but, we got people in our own city, all right, who can't travel up and down some of these corridors, these commercial corridors, all right, because it's a traffic jam. You can't get anywhere. I mean, even if a police, a car decided to, chase after somebody, which they do not do, because it's not safe, you couldn't move. I mean, that's how bad it is. And these businesses, they want to do it. I mean, Councilman School and myself met with them. I mean, they you think these ShopRites or these businesses, some of them that were open 24, they don't want to have any of this happen and the liability be on them. They want to have safe business where people feel welcome to come, right, and spend their money in the city of Philadelphia. Chair recognizes Councilmember Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. White, for your testimony. I had a few questions. I just wanted to make sure I understood this legislation. When you say on-site security, are you saying a physical presence of someone in a parking lot? What does that mean, on-site security?
Yes, that's my understanding. That the way it is written here, right, is that they could have folks on site that would attempt to mitigate or stop this behavior from taking place. I think that's just one piece of this, there's, obviously the cameras and also the sort of physical modifications to the property that could, I think, really help deter this conduct.
And just from your experience, Mr. White, how many parking lots in the city right now are having this issue?
I don't have a specific number on the actual parking lots. I can tell you that, aside from the incident that we saw around City Hall, I think we're primarily seeing these incidents occur are, along the waterfront and in some of the more open areas in East and Central and South divisions along the river, and then extending up into the, some of these larger parking lots in the shopping centers in the far Northeast.
And so, could I find out, can you get back to the chair with how many parking lots have had these instances in the last 3 to 6 months or so? And then the other question I have is there a size requirement of the parking lot? If you have a parking lot that is, a certain size, does this kick in, or is it for any parking lot?
The way the legislation is drafted, my understanding is that this is that this would pertain to any parking lot that has multiple businesses inside of it. I don't know if there's an actual. I don't see anything about a square footage or a number of parking spots or anything like that. I think these are generally happening in larger lots because some of the maneuvers, they call it drifting, right, where they like to spin these cars around, and I think that's where they're they're looking for the enough open space to do those types of maneuvers.
Right. So I guess the question I have is that if you have a surface parking lot that's huge, this doesn't apply if there's no retail.
If I can, let me answer that question, if I may, Mr.
Sure.
White. Councilmember Dom, all right, this is intended, and your office and my office had some brief conversations about, and one of the reasons why I'm holding it is it's about the behavior, all right? Where is the behavior having? So we don't want somebody unattendedly punished or put in a bad spot, which I don't think they will. I mean, look, if you can't turn around a tractor trailer in your parking lot, nobody's going to be drag racing and hanging out. And if there is enough space, right, in a parking lot, surface open to the public parking lot, and people are and there's a nuisance, and there's not only a presence of a nuisance, there's a history of a nuisance, and there's complaints of a nuisance. Then we got to address it, all right? We're just, we got to address it. And, it was mentioned about, security, having, a security person there. I mean, are you telling me that, somebody who is hopefully getting paid $15 an hour, if not, they should raise it? Or you think they're going to go up to, 200 people who are drag racing and saying you got to leave? I don't think that will ever happen. It'll be risk or danger to themselves. But I think, offering these other opportunities to mitigate and preempt this kind of behavior as described as a nuisance, such as drag racing and speed bumps or rumble strips and additional lighting that's not intrusive, just safe, and or speed bumps, including cameras, right, that rolls into our Safe Cam program that we have with our Commerce Department. I think that's the best option, all right, that we can here without, with keeping people safe. Some of the other things we can certainly work out, and that's why I'm holding the bill.
Okay. I was just concerned as to who this would apply to, who wouldn't apply to. I just want to make sure it's clear on that. And then I guess the other question, Mr. White, is that we all are not in favor of this behavior. Okay, I think I can speak for everybody. All right. How do let's just say this behavior was going to happen in one of these parking lots up on Aramingo Avenue, and they get there and they can't get in or they can't do it. They're going to go somewhere else, I assume. Okay, and the question I have is, where's that other place going to be, and how do we get this under control?
No, I think you're absolutely right, Councilman. There's I think we see this issue on the weekends when we're monitoring these occurrences, that they use social media and coordinate with each other and move from place to place. And as police arrive or other conditions that they deem unsuitable to engage in this conduct, they will move. It's certainly I don't want to say it's a game of whack-a-mole, but it's they are certainly apt to change their location throughout the course of a given night.
Okay. I don't have any other questions right now. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, council member. Chair recognizes council member O.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, good morning, Mr. White. Good to see you.
Good morning, Councilman. Always good to see you.
All right, I do have some questions. Just so I'm up to speed, I understand the bill and I understand it's being held, and I understand putting responsibility on the part of the parking lot owner, as was mentioned by the chairman, rumble strips and barriers, things like that. What I'm not clear on is, so when someone is doing donuts in the middle of the street, when they're drag racing, do the police arrest those people? I think they do. Do they?
Again, I think I don't have any actual numbers on how many of these incidents have led to custodial arrests, but I mean there have been certainly instances in the past where people are issued. I believe it's a summary citation for.
Why are they not arrested? Could I ask that? Why are they not arrested? Why are their vehicles not confiscated?
So I think that
is that policy? Is that a policy question right now?
I mean, anytime we are to take somebody into physical custody, actual custodial arrest, right? The first question would be, what is the actual crime that we're charging them with, right? And so,
is it not a crime to drag race down the street? I think it's pretty dangerous. Is it not a crime to do donuts in the middle of a public street? I think that's pretty dangerous. And I think those people who do it publicly will do it again and again until somebody takes their vehicle, sells it, puts them in jail, something like that.
And I think we do look for every possible remedy. And again, here, I think on the way things are, we are looking for ways to conduct this type of enforcement in the best way possible. Yeah. That doesn't involve, putting hands on people, right? That doesn't involve actually trying to.
I'm all for putting hands on people. Let me be clear. And I don't want to put you on the spot. So I'm not putting you on the spot because I understand this is up from above and it goes from, our mayor to our police commissioner and members of council. So I do understand. I'm all for arresting people, putting your hands on them, locking them up, taking their vehicles, and getting rid of them unless they want to go get them back. Maybe what we need is we need to empower the police to arrest the people and to have those confiscation type things. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud because what I'm kind of hearing is that that there is some type of a policy within the police department to not arrest the people who do this. And I suppose they know that. And I think the public is not that clear that they are not being arrested. Anyway, that answers my question. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Council Member Rowe. Is there any other members on the committee that I have not recognized that have joined us and wish to speak on Bill or have any questions, I'm sorry, for Mr. White? And then we'll go to our next person to testify. Mr. White, I thank you for your time and thank you for participating.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Brazel, could you please call our next witness?
Andre Delval.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, Andre, we can hear you. And for the record, I believe, I know we're hearing both bills, but if I know Mr. White had mentioned, he's here to testify, how he was testifying on both bills, but feel free to speak on bill number 210674 and 775. I think the witness list is the same. For the sake of time, just mention and reference what bill you're going to speak to, and we can begin to open it up for questions. So please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chairperson Heenan and Vice Chairperson Dom and members of the Committee on Licensing and Inspection. My name is Andre Del Valle. I am the Director of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Apartment Association. The Pennsylvania Apartment Association is a statewide association representing property managers, landlords across Pennsylvania. Here in Philadelphia, we represent 98 property management companies and over 156,000 units. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify today on bills number 210674 and 210775, introduced by Councilmember Heenan, which would expand property owners' liability and business owners' liability to revise what constitutes as nuisance behavior across the city of Philadelphia. While we believe the spirit of the legislation is well intended to address a number of constituents' concerns, we do believe it does create potential unintended consequences for business owners, especially our property managers and landlords across the city of Philadelphia, which, from the conversation today we don't believe is the intended audience of the legislation. As currently written, Bill number 210674 allows an authorized person to enforce the ordinance by issuing the business owner violation notice for nuisance behavior that takes place during or after the business operating hours and inside the business or on the sidewalk or street or a parking lot abutting the business. While our members have already implemented measures to keep their buildings safe and parking lots safe during the day, they cannot control every factor after hours, which is why they have also implemented measures, whether it be security cameras, speed bumps, gates, and other measures to deter nuisance behaviors on their properties. Even with these measures, they cannot deter or stop individuals who may decide to use their parking lots as a meeting spot, which was mentioned today, for ATVs, dirt bikes, or other activities after hours like we've seen in recent weeks across the city. As written, it would give the authorized individual, I would presume the Philadelphia Police, the authority to determine on site if a business owner should be fined or not. Our members, just like the residents across the city of Philadelphia, rely heavily on the Philadelphia Police Department to respond to those trespassing on their properties and investigate what would constitute as nuisance behavior. However, if no building owner reports the nuisance behavior, especially after hours, violations could occur, leading to the business owners, presumably through a process with the Department of L&I, of Licenses and Inspection, and the Philadelphia Police Department, costing both the city and business owners valuable time, resources, and money. We're grateful to the bill sponsor and his team for their commitment to holding this bill in committee today so that all stakeholders impacted by these bills can continue the conversation to achieve the bill's spirit. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Andre, for your testimony. I just have a couple brief questions, and as you indicated, nobody wants. When we go through this process, and you of all people, understanding, firsthand how important it is to be inclusive, and when bringing people in a collaborative effort to, come up with solutions in some sort of, I'm not going to say compromise, all right, but really kind of addressing the intended purpose and spirit of the legislation. A couple quick questions. Is drag racing in the apartment complex parking lots common?
And Councilmember, thank you. And once again, I want to reiterate, I do agree with you. I would know this, firsthand from my previous role. It is not, but that's what, our fear is with the legislation is that, our parking lots in some of our complexes are big enough. I know you gave, one of the members gave the example of you could turn a tractor trailer around in one of the parking spots, that's, where you'd want these measures implemented. And within our complexes, they do take those measures with security cameras, speed bumps. Some have even implemented the gates, the chain gates there. It is not that big of a problem, but unfortunately, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is, the meetups are happening anywhere where there is a parking lot, that allows that kind of, I guess, gathering. Our members have shared concerns with us about that happening from recent weeks' activities, but that's what our concern is that our property managers and our owners would be subject to a violation if these meetups were to occur at one of their locations. And unfortunately, with dirt bikes, ATVs, I think, the chain links and other measures stop it, but with the dirt bikes, it makes it very difficult to stop all activity.
Yeah, I certainly understand. I can't imagine any of the apartment owners or complexes would want to have meetups happen, and where they're already taking measures to keep their tenants safe. So they would have an issue with it too, wouldn't they?
I think. This is all. Yeah, go ahead.
We're going to walk through this, and I don't want to, completely put you on the spot, but just from a common sense, like nobody wants this happening in their backyard, right? Especially where there's, when the responsibility is on them to make sure that they have a safe, habitable place to live, long term or short term, or in the short term. I think it's bad for business. It's bad for public safety. What would they lose from this bill?
From this bill, from speaking, with the teams, one of the challenges with this bill, I think, is that there's no set process of what an individual who would get a violation potentially, what that would look like for an appeal, right? It would obviously, it seems like it would go through licenses and inspection. It seems like it would also go through the police department. I think the spirit of the bill is to avoid any of these gatherings. But what we're saying from the apartment association is that our members already, have put these measures in place to avoid these meetups. And it's not that it's a very common thing. It's obviously something we'd like to prevent and continue to prevent. But what the legislation is that it could potentially lead our property owners to getting violations, which, given that they're taking good faith efforts to avoid this, we want to avoid.
Okay. Well, we'll be getting together so I can better understand, what the avoidance is and unintended consequences. So I appreciate it. Is any members any questions? Chair recognizes Councilmember Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to understand the bill 710775. The way I'm reading it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it kind of creates a citywide explicit liability for small business owners, medium and large business owners for any nuisance behavior in their parking lots and parking lots they may share. So in theory, this would mean anyone with a small business at a parking lot, they would be liable for the penalties as a nuisance business? Is that correct?
On the macro end, yes.
Okay, and it just seems harsh because it seems to me like, look, we're all on board, I believe, with stopping this behavior, and it almost like if they don't do it in parking lots, they're going to do it in the streets. And I want to go back to what Councilmember O said. It sounds to me like these vehicles should be confiscated and the people should be arrested, but it's not going to stop unless that occurs. They're going to go somewhere else, and it's going to be in the city, and it could be even worse. I'm not saying we should allow it in parking lots or anywhere. I think that's the real problem, enforcement. And this is a Band-Aid, but it's not going to stop it.
Well,
anyway.
Councilman, you are correct, but we certainly do have to, continue on trying to take steps in citywide policies. Firsthand, you were part of the ATV issues, meeting with community groups, and I was on calls, and it's a problem, and they're on our streets, and they're also in parking lots, and they're also gathering, and it's like, okay, so what do? You got to do something, all right? The residents in my district, all right, have put up with it for far too long, and we will find a way. There's no doubt about it. And some of the questions are good questions, And as I stated from the beginning, I'm going to hold till we get some of these questions resolved. But at some point, we have to do something. We owe it. We owe it. We owe it good faith services to the people in the district, right? To use these places, feel safe, to drive our streets, to feel safe, to those who are living in these complexes or parking these cars in parking lots, to feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, then we're not doing our job as much. We got to at least raise the issue, right? I mean, we can only do so much as legislators. Right?
But here's my concern. I'm not against the idea at all. My concern is we're pushing it into the streets. My concern is what we need, what Councilman Oates spoke about, is more enforcement. We need to confiscate the vehicles, and we need more enforcement. And until we, if we don't have it in a parking lot, they're going to show up at 10 o'clock at night. They may do it in the street, and someone could be more dangerous. I'm not saying we shouldn't allow it anywhere, is my position. And we should confiscate these vehicles and arrest people that are violating the laws. And until we do that, this is a good Band-Aid, but it's not going to solve the problem. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other members have any questions for this witness? Thank you, Mr. DeVal. Look forward to catching up and discussing this further. Chair recognizes Ms. Elizabeth Baldwin from the Department of L&I. Welcome. Please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony, please.
Mr. Chair, could I have a second? Commissioner DiPietro, Karen Gus, and Elizabeth Baldwin are here for questions. I don't believe they're providing testimony today.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Welcome, L&I. As you heard, a lot of conversation, and I think the police department, has heard the same concerns. We have a lot of bills, and we have a lot of policies in place, but we have a lack of resources and people for enforcement. So I'm hoping that we can get to a place where enforcement, having the staff to enforce, and enforcing to make sure that our people are having the first responders act appropriately in the appropriately manner. So I don't have any questions. Does anybody, any member of the committee have any questions for L&I? Any other members have any other questions on both of these bills? Bill number 210674, bill number 210775. Commissioner, thank you for joining here. Unless you have any kind of testimony you wish to offer, it seems as the committee doesn't have any questions at this time for you. If you have none, thank you for being here and enjoy your day. Is there any members of or persons from the public that wish to testify on bill number 210674, 210775? Mr. Brazel, is there anyone here wishing to speak or offer testimony on those from the public?
No, sir.
Okay, great. We will move on to bill number 210685. We will start to hear testimony in a moment. I want to give Council Member Green the opportunity, as he had in the beginning and opening of this hearing, to be recognized. Council Member Green. First, Clerk, would you please? We already read the title, Bill. So, Mr. Green, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually having some problems with my laptop, so I'm on my phone. I hopefully be able to get back to my laptop in a few moments. But as I stated at the beginning of this hearing, this is an issue of significance, not only to me as a policymaker, but also to me personally, because of the impact it's had in my life. And I can speak for so many other parents, caregivers, children, and employees in the school district who also have the same concerns regarding asbestos and mold. It's an issue that is very serious. It's an issue that we've been dealing with for a number of years, and it's an issue that at this point the city needs to take a more proactive involvement in making sure that we are having safe educational facilities in the city of Philadelphia. And as a purpose of this legislation, as I stated in the beginning of this hearing, I would hope that the members of this committee would vote the bill out of committee as amended, which has been circulated earlier. And then I will continue to work with the administration on the effective date because I know we're trying to work on making sure that this legislation not only becomes effective as of law, but also effective as a practice to make sure our school facilities are safe for all those who enter.
Thank you, sir. Before we begin to hear testimony, I'd like to note that additional written testimony from the health commissioner on this ordinance has been circulated to members of the committee and will be given to the stenographer to be added to the record. Mr. Pizzell, would you please read our first witness, please?
Jerry Jordan.
Mr. Jordan, are you with us?
Mr. Chair, let me check with some of the witnesses for this committee. Because of the length of witnesses that were scheduled for the first two bills, some people may have thought that the testimony may not occur until a little bit later. So if we could go with administration witnesses and then we will circle back.
Okay, great. So I assume that our health commissioner, Dr. Cheryl Betteridge, is she available? Oh, welcome. There you go. I apologize. I don't know. In my notes here, I had just written testimony. So welcome. Could you please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony on bill number 210685.
So, Dr. Cheryl Bettigal. So, good morning, Chairman Heenan, Vice Chairman Dom, and members of the Committee on Licenses and Inspections. As I said, I'm Dr. Cheryl Bettigal, Commissioner for the Department of Public Health. I'm joined here today by Deputy Mayor for Labor, Rich Laser. Thank you for allowing me to testify on bill number 210685, sponsored by Councilman Green. This legislation, if enacted, would add asbestos and mold to the list of physical conditions that inspectors would have to look for to determine if an educational facility should receive its special certificate of inspection, allowing it to operate as a school building. While the administration is supportive of the intentions of this legislation, we have significant operational concerns that would need to be addressed before implementation could occur. Every child deserves to grow up in a healthy, safe, and nurturing environment. Experiences during childhood, such as poverty, poor nutrition, or exposure to environmental hazards, can shape and impact future health. Despite advances in pediatric care and public health efforts, poor and racial ethnic minority children still face a disproportionate burden of chronic disease, premature death, and preventable illness. Children are especially vulnerable to respiratory irritations and distress. Evidence supports that air pollutants in developing cells early in life can lead to abnormal respiratory function and growth, which can lead to the development of respiratory diseases later in life. Asthma is one of the most common chronic diseases during childhood and causes wheezing, coughing, and difficulty breathing. While some children may have mild symptoms, others may suffer serious asthma exacerbations that result in visits to the emergency room, hospitalizations, or rarely death. Philadelphia has taken major steps to reduce childhood asthma through targeted initiatives. However, there's more work that needs to be done to eliminate the triggers of asthma. If a child has asthma, inhaling mold spores may trigger more frequent attacks and exacerbate the disease. Unfortunately, there are currently no EPA regulations or standards for airborne mold contaminants. This means PDPH has no means of using sampling to check a building's compliance with federal mold standards because such standards do not exist. The key to controlling indoor mold growth is moisture control. While inspections for moisture intrusion, water damage, and visible mold are important, they need to be incorporated into the regular day-to-day maintenance of buildings, with an established plan to respond promptly when moisture intrusion, leaks, dampness, or visible mold are found. The EPA Asbestos Model Accreditation Plan, or MAP, which the EPA issued under the Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act of 1986, AHERA, requires the use of trained and accredited asbestos professionals when conducting asbestos inspections or designing or conducting response actions at schools and public and commercial buildings. Conducting testing on the scale proposed in this bill falls far outside of the current expertise and capacity of staff within PDPH. Even if significant resources were invested to hire trained and certified asbestos inspectors, which would not be possible by the time the legislation is effective on August 1, 2022. I have concerns that maintaining these inspections within the city could fail to assuage the very real concerns of parents and school staff. We believe that hiring an outside vendor that possesses this expertise to conduct independent inspections and to make their reports publicly available would be a better option, since it is more likely to build public trust and would relieve some of the operational burden the legislation would cause. A child's health and education are inexorably intertwined. A healthy child is a better learner. Better childhood health is linked to improved educational attainment, better employment opportunities, and higher income in adulthood. Conversely, healthcare issues can impair students' ability to concentrate and to learn at high levels. I thank you for bringing attention to this important issue and look forward to continuing to work with you to improve the health of our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Commissioner. The chair recognizes Councilmember Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations, Dr. Bettigol, on being named as Health Commissioner for our city. Just want to follow up on your testimony, and I understand the perspective that the administration has taken. I've had some conversation with the administration, and I referenced that in my comments that additional time is needed for implementation from my understanding. My question, though, is what I gathered from your testimony is that using a third-party entity, is that what I'm hearing may be helpful in order to really fully implement this legislation? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, that would be my recommendation. Either way, it's going to take resources, but, it's certainly not impossible to hire and train people. It's just that whether those resources are internal or external may give a different outcome in terms of what parents and staff members are looking for to really fully trust what comes out of this, and not just for today and this year and this administration, but we're looking to build something that will establish trust and maintain it over decades. So yeah, go ahead.
And are you saying that a combination of internal hiring and external, considering we have about 226 school buildings, I believe there's probably a little under 200 that have some concerns regarding asbestos issues, and probably maybe 60 to 70 that have real critical asbestos issues. Are you saying to kind of do a ramp up to kind of get our arms around the issue, and then we may or may not need that same level of third-party support going forward?
So my recommendation would be that the inspections and the certification be done by an independent third party. Mm-hmm. Okay. I just think that's going to inspire more trust, and then those reports would be publicly available, would need to be publicly available. There are now existing vendors who could do that, so I don't think that would require a ramp up. Doing it internally would certainly require a ramp up, but I think there's some other concerns besides than time needed for ramp up. Just in terms of then it's internal to the city, and so we're inspecting us in some sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you also made reference to some of the standards regarding mold. And are you saying that there really are not best practices per se for mold that could be applicable for what the intention of this legislation?
So there are best practices for mold. What there aren't are thresholds. And so the idea of certifying a building as mold free is what's challenging, because there's molds all around us, and we live with that. Right. But it's when you have, chronic moisture and mold replicates there, that you start to have problems with dampness. And the problem is, I think this may be one of the reasons that there aren't current thresholds. Even if you were to do sampling and find some building doesn't have a problem with mold, if the roof then begins to leak or a pipe begins to leak, you could easily have problems develop, and they can develop fairly quickly. So usually with mold, best practices are for routine inspections, to be happening frequently, by the people who are in the building. And then if you start seeing an area of dampness develop, you can address that right away before the mold starts to grow.
But similar to a balance sheet, which is a snapshot, couldn't we do a snapshot perspective of what the status of the building is at a certain period of time? And that snapshot, just like an auditor's report would say, there's certain issues or concerns that could lead to some of that mold issues and exposure going forward, and needs to be followed up on a more regular basis from inspection?
I think that the school district does do regular inspections of its buildings to look for that, is to certify or to say it meets certain standards, because those thresholds have not been defined. So it's that certification process that would be a problem.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know other members have questions. I know some of our other witnesses have arrived as well. So.
Yep, that'd be great. If Councilmember Green, could you just have your staff coordinate with mine on who is present, on our witness list, so the clerk can appropriately call our next witness. Commissioner, I just have a real quick question. And I know that you had just received the honor of becoming the new commissioner, and congratulations. I think you're going to be awesome, and we're happy to have you. So you might not have a lot of history with these issues and the school district. And I know some of the folks that are here, in particular one, Jerry Rosman, and we're going to hear from him. But third party, does the health department regularly check school buildings, or the school district? Does the health department regularly engage with the school district? School district's not here, so they're not going to be able to answer those questions. So my question to you is the health department, and I do think it's probably going to be like burden on the health department to do this internally. Does the health department coordinate with the school district in asbestos and lead paint or lead inspections, or has it typically been third-partied out from somebody who's an expert?
There is some combination.
One kind of scale.
There is some combination there. So we do have 2 asbestos inspectors. They are not, I believe, trained and certified to the level that would be required for this legislation, but they are available to check if there's a problem or a complaint, and have done that. We work with the district on multiple different levels. For example, on COVID, we're working with them constantly. But this level of inspecting and certifying all the buildings would be a very large increase in our role.
And I agree, only because I had dealt with some of the asbestos experts that you have and or people. They do an incredible job. The scale and the responsibility for the health department, I'm not sure would be capable to address this. My question was more simply like, how do you coordinate with the school district on, with how many school buildings that we have in the city of Philadelphia? And are you familiar with what the school district's practice is? Because I'm not sure if they have individuals to go around and make inspections, or do they contract that out to a third party themselves? Are you aware, do they contract out to a third party?
I am not 100% sure whether they do that currently. I know that they do have their own building engineers, and they do on-site inspections. I haven't seen terribly recent ones up on their website, but they do post inspection results.
Yeah, as they should, right? As you were describing earlier. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to really kind of talk about the coordination and to what level of in depth is there the asbestos inspections, especially when the school district just released a couple years ago a $5 billion school facilities plan, working with a lot of people. I wasn't sure if the health department was a part of that. Thank you. I would like to recognize Councilmember Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I just want to congratulate our new health commissioner and wish you the best. I look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Point of information, the school district did submit written testimony, which was circulated, I believe, to all members of the committee.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for reminding everybody about that. I was just simply looking at folks that were available to testify here on this bill in today's hearing only. Chair recognizes Council Member O.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Again, congratulations, Health Commissioner. Thank you for taking on this responsibility.
Thank you.
You having just gotten here, I'm just asking these questions, and you might surprise me, but I don't think you know the answers, but I'm going to ask you anyway. The school district of Philadelphia, do they provide, or have you any way of obtaining data or information, any records related to the removal of asbestos from the schools? Going back, I think, to probably 1989 or something like that. I mean, are there any records that you can actually get your hands on to see what has been done about removal and remediation of asbestos in public school buildings?
So there are, I don't know if people pronounce it AHERA or AHERA, but AHERA. There are reports that are posted on the school district's website. As I mentioned, I didn't see anything from the last year or two, but they do have some publicly available data.
Yeah, I think it's very limited, at least from the conversation we're having about trying to look at the problem of asbestos in schools. To my knowledge, and I don't know the answer to this, I try to find the answer, I can't get an answer. The school might have spent $125 million in the removal and remediation of asbestos. There's supposed to be detailed records, removal of asbestos in 20-pound bags, very carefully kept records on where they were disposed of, how they were disposed of, which would at least provide some indication of what is happening in certain schools where the asbestos was removed or where it was remediated, how long ago, what the cost was. But at least from the earlier publications, they estimated spending about $450 million, something like that. And what I'm not clear on is it seems we're constantly dealing with this asbestos problem decades later, but we have no, at least I don't have any indication, what was done to remove and remediate asbestos going back to the time where they first started this with federal legislation and requirements, and yet I can't seem to get those records.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to speak for the school district. I know that they do have some reports online. With asbestos, you're probably well aware of this. It's tricky because if it's intact, it isn't necessarily a risk. And so ripping it all out can create more of a hazard. It's just that, if it's, for example, in floor tiles and they're under heavy use, they can go from intact to crumbling during the course of a school year. So that's a challenge. And that's one of the reasons for the routine maintenance. But, I wasn't able to locate reports just in a simple online search for, 2020, 2021, but they presumably are somewhere.
Is there a point where you would consider whether, for example, you say this old building has got so much asbestos, it's such a problem, the remediation of it will be an ongoing problem that we need to just shut this building down, or perhaps, we can maintain it, contain it. This is a fit building. As long as we do that, and we have another good 30 years here with this building. I mean, in terms of health, does something like that ever come to mind that you might do something like that?
I don't know the answer to that question. Is there ever a situation where you say the whole building has to go because of asbestos? I can look into that and get an answer for you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Council Member. Chair recognizes Council Member Swilla, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. Welcome and congratulations. You've been here a while, so it's not a welcome, but it's you've been doing the job for quite some time, and we appreciate it. One of the in your testimony, you stated that the school district has been doing some of these inspections, and I think part of the concerns were that there's a little bit of lack of trust in those inspections and how they do them. We were trying to have them work with the PFT and maybe a third-party provider to come in and do them together. Therefore, we would get a point of transparency where people would start trusting the results of these inspections. The health department were you guys ever involved in any of those inspections?
So our inspectors have gone on site. They did relatively recently, a few months ago, when there was a question that was raised about asbestos at Masterman. They can go on site and have gone on site in response to a complaint. But, typically, like, the full inspection process for all the city schools is far beyond the capacity of our current inspection crew.
Okay, so you did go on site at Masterman, and what was your findings?
So the findings of the group, they didn't find anything that was out of order, that was beyond what they should have found. This was not a full inspection. They didn't go into every room. They didn't look at everything. So this was not our technicians doing a full asbestos inspection of a school.
Okay, and as you said, it would probably be overwhelming for the health department to be able to do this in every school, and your recommendation would be a third party. And I think if we were to do that, I think it would be important to build the transparency and build the trust of these inspections with the third party. I think obviously we would want the PFT and the district to either select a third party, but also be able to do those inspections together. Do you see any problem with having these united inspections as part of the process to not only see what the issues and concerns are, but then go back again after they're repaired or after they're fixed to make sure they're done properly?
Yeah, no, again, I can't speak for the school district, but, I think a piece of this process is the inspections themselves, and a piece of it is people having faith in those inspections and trusting the results.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I'd like the record reflect that Council Member Catherine Gilmore Richardson has joined us for the record. Commissioner, I thank you for your time. Does anyone else have any further questions for our health commissioner here today? I don't see any. Commissioner, thank you so much for your testimony and participating in today's hearing. Before we start our next panel, I would just like to add my quick experience and understanding. I don't know why we're here, all right, with this bill. I mean, it seems like, we've been dealing with the asbestos issue for many, many years. Having third parties, having internal people, putting people in a room, the PFT, the school district, outside contractors, experts, environmental specialists, coming up with a plan. Something's not working. and I hope that this legislation, whether it gets out of committee or gets finally passed, this legislation really draws attention and focuses in on executing a plan where everybody is involved. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. It's too important of an issue where our kids and our members of PFT and those who help teach our kids and their families at such a great exposure. I mean, we could talk about all the money in the world as we had bonds, we had this, pre-pandemic over the summer, there was $15 million for lead paint and asbestos remover. And then next thing you know, it went into, $460 million bond and this, and I don't know where we are anymore. I'm just so confused. And I hope that we can, shed some light on it here today. And I think everybody has, the intentions of making sure, all right, that our buildings are safe, our kids are safe, and our teachers and staffing in these buildings and the families that everybody goes home to remain safe. Clerk, would you please read the panel of our next folks that are going to be testifying here today? And panel, would you please, upon being recognized, state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony. Thank you so much.
For our next panel.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, council member.
Yes, this is Council Member Catherine Gilmore Richardson. I requested to be recognized quickly.
Yes, you may. Chair recognizes
Okay.
Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to rise this morning as in attendance for this hearing as I'm leaving one of our high schools in the Northeast for career and technical education fair. I wanted to rise in support of this legislation and thank my colleague, Councilmember Green, for moving this effort along. As a public school graduate, as a former teacher in the public schools, and now a parent of children in the Philadelphia public school system, there is no more important and urgent issue than addressing the environmental hazards that are plaguing so many of our schools across the school district of Philadelphia. We have to think about our students, we have to think about our teachers, staff, and everyone impacted by the conditions of these schools. And I think this is a no-brainer, and I'm asking all of my colleagues to be in support of this legislation. So I just wanted to rise and thank my colleague, Councilmember Green, and all of you who have worked so diligently on this issue over the years, from the PFT and all of the labor representatives who have worked with us on these issues, all of the staff and the teachers, the students, just everyone for your hard work in getting us to this point. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, council member. Clerk, would you please read the next panel that are up?
Yes, sir. We have Jerry Jordan, Jerry Rossman, and Arthur Steinberg.
Mr. Jordan, you're up first. Please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony, and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. Federation of Teachers. Thank you, Councilmember Green, for moving this bill forward as one critical facet of a multi-pronged approach to the ongoing facilities crises that affects far too many of our students and staff each day. For decades, this union has led the fight for safe and healthy school buildings. In fact, it was in 1985 that our asbestos fight began, and the union publicly called out the district for improperly handling asbestos remediation. School communities would not re-enter these schools until PFT's Health and Welfare Fund verified that they were safe. The more than 10,000 asbestos inspections in the years to follow brought about improvements to the entire remediation process. I thought it important to highlight that early work to emphasize just how important having standards and community trust is in addressing the facilities crises. I have said many times that the district did not create the facilities crises, but their responses, or lack thereof, have perpetuated problems that could and should have been fixed years ago, and community trust has been shattered. Surely, we need funding. In fact, the PFT founded and continues to lead the Fund Our Facilities Coalition to, in part, identify real workable funding solutions. We have secured millions of additional dollars in local and state funding as a result of our collective efforts. And we intend to continue to advocate and fight for every dollar that we know our students so richly need and deserve. But today, I want to focus on the process-based concerns that continue to hinder much-needed progress. On October 15th, I wrote a detailed letter to Dr. Height outlining our concerns with the process. In my letter, which I have attached to my testimony, I outlined 3 main process deficiencies. The district's refusal to provide our Director of Environmental Science, Jerry Roseman, with regular access to buildings as he has had for nearly 40 years. The district's ignoring of emergency problems submitted via our Healthy Schools Tracker app, with some problems left to languish for years. And the district's refusal to implement protocols that have either been in practice for years, or protocols that have been agreed upon, or protocols that we have outlined that are best practices. In the letter, I outlined where this negligence has led to very real consequences in our school buildings. I hope you will look through the absolute crisis situations at the youth school, Furness High School, Wright Elementary, Baldy Middle School, and know that they are emblematic of issues that we are seeing district-wide. It is absolutely imperative that Councilmember Green's bill be passed so that additional and significant oversight can be implemented swiftly. Frankly, the response I received from Dr. Height, which is also attached to my testimony, was inaccurate and misleading. I would like to thank the members of council who are members of the Fund Our Facilities Coalition. And I want to also share the letter that 46 members of the coalition signed and sent to Dr. Height this week. This letter is in response to the concerns I outlined today and urges a number of specific action items, including the following: immediate access to buildings for Jerry Roseman and members of his team, addressing the chronic lapses in responses and remediation plans on the Healthy Schools Tracker app, utilizing the policies and procedures outlined in a series of documents included with the PFT's letter, implementing the recommended course of action outlined for specific schools and situations, while noting that these situations exemplify district-wide concerns. These recommendations can and should be straightforward to implement. We remain ready, willing, and able to work with the district to engage in a fully collaborative approach to the facilities crises. However, our efforts have gone rebuked and rebuffed, and as such, it is urgent that Council pass Bill 210685 to implement a critical layer of oversight that is missing from this process. I thank you for your time today and look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you. I know we called a panel. Is everybody that was called up on this panel speaking?
Yes.
Okay. Next, I'm going to call Mr. Jerry Roseman. Jerry, can you please introduce yourself for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jerry Roseman, the Director of Environmental Science for the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers Health and Welfare Fund and Union, a position I've held for many years. Since it was formed, I've also served as the Environmental Science Advisor to the Philadelphia Healthy Schools Coalition, providing information and support to parent, community, and public advocacy groups working to improve school facility conditions. As the PFT's environmental science director and consistent with my role as environmental science advisor for the Philly Healthy Schools Coalition, I've been tasked with conducting data-driven, evidence-based assessment activities and to review data and information provided by the district as part of the collaborative efforts with the district to look at facility and environmental conditions. However, as described by Jerry, the lack of information provided by the district and the lack of access to schools for environmental inspection results in an inability for any of us to be able to fully understand the scale and scope of the hazards and facility conditions currently faced, and compromises planning, oversight, and sustainable improvement of school conditions. The recent actions taken by the district have further eroded stakeholder trust and confidence in the district's ability and willingness to work with staff, students, parents, and others in open, clear, and meaningful ways to ensure and to verify safe school conditions. My inability to perform independent professional inspections means that concerns about the fact that dangerous conditions are likely to remain at some or all of these schools, but without us having a way to know for sure if these spaces are safe, partly because of the lack of district transparency. Limited recent partial inspections at Masterman, Heston Elementary School, and R.R. Wright Elementary School support this conclusion. In fact, the limits of district transparency were on full display yesterday and today when an asbestos-related steam heat emergency occurred, impacting the basement art room at Masterman. Again, the district in this situation didn't provide details about how asbestos abatement was conducted, how testing was performed, and no test results were provided to any stakeholders. This art room situation is an especially concerning one for several reasons related to the asbestos issues that we all know have existed at Masterman, and the significant remaining quantities of asbestos insulation and the identification of an imminent asbestos hazards previously documented in this specific area. The type of information just referred to as not having been provided related to asbestos, as well as what I will describe next, is the kind of information that we need to have provided for real transparency. Just one other example of an information type is the indoor environmental quality evaluation and inspection effort that was effectively and jointly conducted starting in August of 2010, more than 10 years ago, following a collaborative development process between the district and the PFT. This process was abruptly canceled by the district with no notification, communication, coordination, data or information shared or provided since April of this year. While there is a lot of detail about currently available environmental data sets that the district has that I would be able to provide, I'd like council to at least be aware of a few of the major databases and information sources that can and should be immediately shared right now by the district. The IAQ, this Indoor Environmental Quality Dashboard Database, has about 250,000 data points and information from school inspections conducted between 2010 and the current date, and it's ongoing. The Parsons Facility Condition Assessment, the FCA, data from the district's $3 million 2015 to 2017 facility condition assessment process, and the currently ongoing one with updated data and information from the 2020-2021 facility condition assessment should also be shared. That's critical. All information and data associated with the DoneSafe environmental computerized management system that is meant to aggregate multiple pieces of information and data about school environmental hazards is needed. All the lead and water testing data in accessible and analyzable form, and all lead, paint, and plaster assessment, testing, and remediation data, as well as all the asbestos data. So with respect to transparency then, this legislation should include language requiring the district to provide any building safety advisory group established with full and complete access to all data and information in machine readable and easy to access formats that are collected and retained by the district and that relate to environmental hazards and facility systems and conditions. I'm happy to provide a more complete list of the data sets that I am familiar with as requested. The bill should also include language directing the district to work in a joint and collaborative manner to further coordinate and align the data and information from the PFT Healthy Schools Tracker mobile app with district data and information platforms to better understand, evaluate, and respond to environmental hazards. I'd like to take a moment to talk about remediation and response work performed by the district and this notion of best practices, something Dr. Haidt has recently questioned as an approach that can or should be taken by the district when addressing asbestos, lead, mold, or other hazardous conditions. It's important for council members to know, I think, that there are several already developed and agreed to best practices plans and approaches addressing the assessment, evaluation, remediation, and testing of asbestos, lead paint, lead in water, and mold. Unfortunately, in many instances, especially over this past year, the district simply refuses to implement these measures, or sometimes even questions the validity of having to comply with recognized, quote, best practices measures. These best practices, the ones that I just referred to, were created, again, in collaboration between the PFT and the district, and in some cases, particularly with lead paint and lead in water, with the input from parent, community, environmental, and other public stakeholders, and with, as everybody here knows, the assistance of and legislation by City Council. Existing best practices, including those for asbestos, mold, lead paint, and lead in water, among others, for example, around construction project work and indoor air quality assessment and remediation generally, are all something that can be looked at right now. In fact, during an 8-month period in 2020, a document titled School District of Philadelphia Asbestos Abatement Program Final, dated 8/10/2020, and agreed to by the district, by the PFT, and SEIU 32BJ representatives, was drafted by the City of Philadelphia's third-party consultant, ARC Environmental, which had been retained by the mayor's office to draft such a plan to guide district asbestos work. The third-party consultant also created an additional best practices memo to include items for further consideration. Much of what was written and agreed to still has not been implemented by the district almost 15 months later. As with the extensive list of databases and information sources, there's also a list of these best practices and approaches that have already been developed in written form that can be quickly and broadly shared. With respect to best practices, then, the bill should include language requiring that as a rock-solid starting point, the district must implement the practices, procedures, and approaches that have been previously and long discussed, and for which written understandings, protocols exist related to hazard control associated with asbestos, lead, mold, ventilation, construction activities, and in occupied buildings. The final two issues I will briefly touch on, again, from a practical recommendation-focused standpoint, include public trust and the development of a comprehensive educational facilities master plan. Many have described the lack of trust and confidence in the district's ability to effectively address facility condition deficiencies and environmental hazards, and to do what is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of all Philadelphia school students and staff. I would recommend that the bill address this concern by including language charging the Building Safety Advisory Group with helping to build public trust by presenting relevant information as part of a State of the Schools report on a monthly or otherwise regular basis in open public meetings to the City Council, to the Board of Education, and to the district's currently established Environmental Advisory Committee. Finally, my final point relates to the urgent, immediate need to create a long overdue comprehensive educational facilities master plan to guide the work of our district in modernizing and developing 21st century schools for every student in every neighborhood, while at the same time having plans in place for effective maintenance of the buildings while waiting their turn for major renovation. Let me assure you that hundreds of large and small school districts across the United States not only have these comprehensive plans developed and in place, but have had them for a decade or more. A major purpose of all the money and effort spent by the district on facility condition assessments, on system-wide assessment and testing programs for lead and asbestos, for indoor environmental quality, ventilation, and so much else should be geared toward the development of a comprehensive educational facilities master plan, without which sustainable improvement and modernization can't possibly proceed in a planned and effective manner. It's therefore my final recommendation that language should be included in the bill to charge the Building Safety Advisory Group with the development and oversight of a process leading to the drafting of a comprehensive educational facility master plan to begin as soon as possible. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions that might arise.
Thank you for your testimony. Clerk, could you please read our next person to testify?
We have a panel. It is Shakita Gaines, Sateria Kersey, and Cindy Farlino.
Great. Thank you all for joining us. Would the first person please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon. Well, good morning. I am Shakita Gaines. I am the Philadelphia Home and School Council President. I am coming here to speak on behalf of parents and stakeholders and what we have been going through for over 20 plus years. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm emotional about these things because I just got a phone call that was unnecessary. I am one of those parents who has been fighting for almost 10 years for the abatement and change for the school district of Philadelphia and the school district of Philadelphia. We have been working hard to help support our parents and our stakeholders and our students and our teachers and staff so they are not in buildings that are full of asbestos, full of mold, full of lead. What we have witnessed over the last 10 years has been a travesty to the education department at the school district of Philadelphia. There has been no transparency. There has been no real change. We have teachers and staff who are scared to go inside of their buildings because they are scared of dying. We have children who are scared of dying, and we have parents who have no other outlet but to send their children into schools that they will ultimately or may ultimately die from. We are begging City Council to come up and approve this bill, but also come up with a real action plan that protects us. I have a 7-year-old son that I would love to see back in a public school. But as a mom, I cannot. I refuse to put him back in a space where he may die. Other parents don't have that luxury. There are hundreds of thousands of students who walk in those schools every single day and don't know if they're going to get a clean bill of health when they go back to the doctors. I'm not going to talk too long because quite honestly, I'm tired and I know you guys are drained. My goal here is to ensure that this city and city council gets true power, but also all stakeholders, all parents, PFT, CASA, everyone involved gets true power inside of our schools and be able to have healthy schools where children can go and feel and get educated and feel safe inside of their schools. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Hi, this is Councilmember Green. I'm having some technology issues. I did have some questions, but I'm not sure if the technology issues will impact me in asking those questions. I just want to state for the record, I want to thank all the witnesses that have testified so far and who are going to testify if not able to come back. I think your testimony speaks for the issue that needs to be addressed today. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. For the record, on our last panel, I know there was an author. Was author set to testify, give public testimony?
No.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Our next person to testify, would you please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony. And thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm next. This is from
I
CASA.
Sorry, that's a little technical difficulty on my end. You may state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Clerk, please read the next person to testify. Clerk, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here. We have Sateria Kersey and Cindy Farlini.
All right. We need to respond quickly on this. We got people waiting in line. Thank you.
You can go, Ms. Farlina.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having us here. This bill is a great start, and we at Teamster Local 502, which is CASA, appreciate your efforts. Our union members include the administrators who run our schools, and as such are charged with communicating with our staff and with our families and students. The School District of Philadelphia has generally not been open with supplying our administrators with critical environmental information and data. So in most cases, we do not have the information we need to both understand and to share important hazardous conditions with our school communities. Over the past few years, more than 20 schools have had to be closed for asbestos, mold, and lead paint hazard remediation. At my school, which was Meredith School, and at McClure, and at so many other elementary schools, we were working and teaching and learning in serious conditions that we were not informed were present. Additionally, we need to organize our communities to demand facts on the monitoring data before, during, and after remediation procedures. Because we could not do it ourselves, we had to organize our communities. We all know the lack of transparency from the School District of Philadelphia at SLA and Ben Franklin, which was finally exposed in the Inspector General's report. Let me remind all of us that councilpersons Gim and Green and other councilpersons led the fight for safe standards for lead in drinking waters in our school, not the School District of Philadelphia, who was forced to comply and install safe drinking water filtration systems in every school as a result of City Council's hard work. Another issue I want to bring up before the committee is the fear among our members of retaliation from senior management for requesting transparency and openness about environmental issues. People in high levels have warned school administrators to get their staff and community, quote, under control. It is not that the School District of Philadelphia is overmatched by lack of funding. It is they continue to not be open and transparent, not sharing data, not building trustworthy partnerships with our schools. Our members are invested in our schools, our tasks as leaders, and our communities. We are hopeful that this bill will be the beginning of the effort to address operational issues through independent oversight. And I just want to say, I've ended my remarks, that what Jerry Roseman was actually talking about, we have much of this in place. It is just not enforced. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Does any members of this committee wish to ask any questions of this panel, or any persons of the public wish to have any questions of this panel on today's piece of legislation that is upon us here? Is there anyone else that wish to testify? Okay, may you may state your name for the record and then begin with your testimony.
Councilmember Heenan.
Yes. Yes, who am I speaking with?
Mark Squilla, how are you?
Hey, Councilmember, how are you?
Hold on. Sorry, I'm having a problem unmuting myself there. I think.
Be safe, Councilmember.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Specifically to Mr. Roseman, and thank you for testifying. You know, when we did the bill on lead paint, it was a big help to get an agreement between the district and the PFT to come with the guidelines of how we would not only inspect, but then be able to clean up and then re-inspect. Do you believe that this is still being done today? I know initially we were working together on that and make sure that this was all being done properly. Do you believe over time that we have sort of lost our direction there, or is it still being completed as legislation was proposed?
No, I think that way has definitely been lost. It was a really successful campaign and an effort that was put in place, and it worked. In this last year, that has fallen apart. I know that because I was an integral part of receiving information and collaborating in looking at test results and on the work that was done. That's not happening. And I also know it because although we've been engaged in very limited inspection and assessment work, as we were testifying to, earlier in the summer, there was some asbestos testing work that went on. And in looking at the schools, the couple schools that I've been able to be in, there is damaged lead paint for sure in elementary school areas that are violative of both the law and the process that we put in place. So no, it's very hard to tell the full scale and scope because there's so little information. I do know that it's not being, the process is not met as it was before, Councilman Squilla.
All right, thank you. What would you recommend us do then? Because my fear is once we put legislation in place, you know, we expect it to be followed and done so in a way that's both collaborative and transparent. If we do something here also with asbestos, is it going to go down the same path? I think it's important for us to make sure that once we put something in place that it is followed. Do you have any recommendations that we could do as far as the lead paint bill that could even correlate to the asbestos and mold that we're looking to do now?
You know, it's kind of a dangerous question to ask me, in that I'm looking at this in a very close way, and we heard Shakita, the emotion in her voice, and I feel responsible when I walk into these schools for addressing people and trying to deal with these conditions. I mean, we know what happens when they're not properly addressed, and I feel as a public health environmental science practitioner a particular pull to do that. And the truth is that it seems like this needs to be mandated by the officials who can mandate this. And now maybe that is the mayor's office and the mayor and the Board of Education. But these things we're talking about, the lead work, asbestos work, this indoor environmental quality work have been in place for a long time. It's very straightforward. There shouldn't be much to argue about. And I think it's, right now the elected officials have to demand and require the district to comply. And I think short of that, we'll see what we've been looking at now, which is sometimes very developed procedures and practices in place, sometimes law, an ordinance and bills in place, and non-compliance.
Well, I appreciate your input and input of Jerry, obviously, but we need the district to also play a part in this. And, now that we're doing the search, it's really important that as we search for a new superintendent, that they're aware of this legislation, that both past legislation with the lead, but also current legislation that we're looking to do. And we need to get accountability held on the district side that they will be following this legislation. And we have to work with our administration to make sure, too, that this legislation is followed. And it's really a great intent that we have here. But we know if there's no enforcement and no follow-up, it just goes by the wayside, and we're really not protecting the people who we are intending to protect. So thank you for your continued support. Thank you for your information that you provide. And I look forward to continue to working with you both on the lead bill that was passed previously, but also on these bills.
Thank you, council member. Jerry, hang in there for me. I want to give Ms. Kersey the opportunity to give her testimony. So please state your name for the record and you may proceed, and thank you for your patience.
Of course, Councilman. Good morning, all. My name is Sateria Kersey. I come to you as a parent of a school district child and also the president of the Masterman Home and School Association. So since about 2017, the Masterman HSA has been fighting for information regarding asbestos at Masterman. Students have been wearing masks prior to COVID-19 to protect themselves from the asbestos that was inside the building. Trying to get information from the district is like trying to get information from a rock. It just doesn't happen. Unfortunately, the transparency and the honesty is just not there. We know that these buildings are dangerous. We know that they are causing mesothelioma. We know they are causing increased asthma attack. They are causing headaches. They are causing an array of problems that we just haven't been able to diagnose. We have to do something. As I continue to have my child go to a school that is obviously toxic, as I get ready to send a kindergartner to school next year, I have to wonder what else is in these buildings. As I look at the data, I also noticed that the increase of asbestos and the increase of toxins in these buildings are also equated with the poverty in the city and the ratings of these schools. As I did my research and as I get ready to select schools for my kindergartner, I'm looking at where the asbestos is in these schools and the ratings. And I'm looking at these schools is that these schools have 3 and 4 ratings where our children can barely read, write, and do math. And this is sad and it's unacceptable. I'm asking you guys to pass this bill so that we can do something, so that we can protect our children. We can't continue allowing our children to come out and be sick. We can't allow them to be uneducated. And we have to do something. We absolutely have to do something. I'm sure that Shakita Gaines and Jerry Roseman and Cindy have said it over and over again, but we're causing a new generation of health issues. We're causing a new generation of children that don't want to go to school because they're sick. We're causing teachers not to want to work in buildings where they may get sick. We have to do something to correct the issues that are in our schools. And I'm asking you to pass this bill to have it continue to go on so that we can start to do something. I'll tell you this, if Masterman is the #1 school in the city and Masterman is having these issues, can you imagine what the number 100 school is doing? What the schools that aren't the elite schools are doing? Imagine what's happening in other schools if the district is allowing this to happen to the city's top schools in this city. Masterman was ranked the #1 school in the city. So if they are hiding toxins in this building, what are they hiding at other school buildings? This has to stop, and we have to hold the district accountable. The district is now looking for a new superintendent, but the superintendent that we have is not performing at his max and at his best. So we have to hold him and his administration to the T, and we have to hold them accountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I have a question for Jerry Roseman. Jerry, are you available?
I am. Yep. Of course.
Jerry, I got a couple quick questions, and I mentioned it early on. I seem to be, I don't know, maybe a little bit lost or confused in the process, and obviously insert COVID in the middle of all this, which kind of, I can't even say had taken a priority, right? Because asbestos is a priority, lead paint removal is a priority, people's health and welfare and safety is a priority. But we addressed it, or tried to address, to my knowledge, the air quality as quickly as we possibly could, so we can get our kids and our students and teachers back in person. But pre-COVID, there were, and I had mentioned, like $14-15 million that was approved by the board, approved for work in our schools, not all of our schools, obviously, right? And then it quickly rose to $150 million for asbestos and lead paint removal. But Jim Creedon was around at that time and has since left his responsibility with the school district as a consultant, trying to manage our construction and abatement process. At that time, I recall, specifically, all right, the PFT school district, and that which includes you, Jerry, like a third-party consultant, right? A third party agreed on a third party to manage this process. This way, it wasn't the school district, it wasn't the PFT, and there wasn't community. Did that ever happen? And what happened with that? And what is the status of that? And why are we still, talking about this when, plans have, seemed to be, I thought, in place, which if they're not, then it's problematic.
So I think it is. I can see why it's really confusing. So in 2019 and into 2020, we had these 12 schools closed because of asbestos problems. We had the teacher reporting a mesothelioma case from Meredith School, and we had the situation at Ben Franklin SLA, and these were not really new situations. And sort of behind the scenes, the work that I was doing, looking at these AHERA surveys, these asbestos surveys, the first 23 that were done by the district in late November, early December into January were done very poorly. And at that point, they were sharing that information. I saw that. I commented to the district, and we decided to stop that process. The district stopped that process and decided to work together to try to resolve that. At the same time, the PFT had reached out to the mayor and to others, laying out a lot of these problems, and the mayor's office got involved in January and February of 2020 and had the PFT, SEIU, and the district at the table with a third-party consultant. The name of that environmental consultant was ARC Environmental. That third-party consultant came in with people from the managing director's office at the table, and we had a number of meetings in person until schools closed in March, and then online. And the whole point of the discussions was to hammer out agreements and procedures that should be implemented with respect to asbestos. And I will tell you that what was used as the main document by the third-party consultant, with everyone's agreement, was a document that I had drafted with the school district's environmental director several years before that we were using. So that document formed the basis of this. ARC Environmental, on the 10th of August of 2020, drafted a document called School District of Philadelphia Asbestos Abatement Program, and it was called Final. That document had been agreed to everybody who was sitting around the table. It went back and forth. The PFT, not every best practice was put in place, but the practices in place were important. They were meaningful. They were better than what had been in place before. They involved communication and outreach and notification and data sharing, as well as better processes at the site to abate asbestos and so on. It was all done and finished. It never got implemented by the School District of Philadelphia. It's been sitting now for over a year like that. And in fact, the work that was being done with asbestos in our schools was less compliant with anything we had even before that process. So that was done, that was accepted, it exists as a document. The second document that was created by this consultant, ARC Environmental, was called, I think, Best Practices Memo. At the time, there was an agreement to do these other asbestos approaches. There was also an understanding that there are best practices out there not being implemented in our schools that make sense to try to think about and do. There are issues of cost and some other issues, and so the conversation was the school district and PFT should sit down moving forward and work toward implementing these elements. That never happened. So that's where we're sitting today. So that it's confusing. It just needs to be implemented. The district is simply just not doing it.
And, you know, I'm confused, and I was involved a little bit, right? And it knew a little bit more, I think, than a lot of other people. Let's just say that on city council. And, you know, and I didn't know the name was documented. I just knew that things were, a process was being put in place. Third party was being agreed upon. All parties were at the table having input. And then here we are. I mean, in a blink of an eye, here we are. And, you know, that to me, you know, in addition to, I know I said the $15 million, that was just for a summer break, but didn't we approve? Wasn't there like a $460 some million bond approved to deal with? So there were two bonds, right? There was almost like $1 billion, like two separate ones, like $500 million construction one, another one that was maybe it was three something but it was a lot of money to deal with asbestos removal and remediation. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't know about like the hundreds of millions of dollars, but I'll tell you what I remember because I was there. Arthur Steinberg and I were at the table with Jim Creedon and his team at the time between February, March, and June. I think that's when he resigned his position. And during that time, we were working in collaboration to come up with the best approach to remediating asbestos that we could come up with. At that point, you can imagine that, you know, the selection of locations to deal with first and then next should be driven by the hazard that's posed and not by other issues. And with the mobile app and some of the data analysis we had done, we sat down with the district and we came up with a plan. My recollection, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, is that Creedon and the district did commit some $10-15 million in a kind of a purposeful action during that period in order to try to address these remediation and abatement issues. I think subsequent to that, maybe part of the recovery funds and monies, there are some hundreds of millions, I don't know. But that definitely was something we talked about, we discussed together, and we were working on. And as I said, I think that, you know, as of August of 2020, we thought we had an approach and a platform that could be announced and work. And
And I agree with you. I appreciate you explaining it. And I don't really, the intent of me asking these questions isn't to complicate things more, right? It's my responsibility, right? Not only as a council person, but as a chairman to talk about, you know, my experience and what I'm aware of. So I can't even ask, you know, it would make it easier for me to ask direct questions if I knew where the hell we are at the moment and where we were starting from a few years ago. And, you know, and I'm not even talking about the American Recovery Act, federal dollars that came. Right. Put that aside. This was pre-COVID. All right. Mm-hmm. This is pre where, you know, we had bond approvals for for the attention to the issues that we're discussing here today, right? When it comes to the abatement of asbestos in a more thoughtful way, right? I think the $15 million is very specific, right? That, as you described, lead paint and asbestos removal, right? It only scratched the surface of the bigger issue, and when an issue came up at a school, and then you realize, all right, well, then maybe we'll do a more collaborative approach in not just removing that piece that they found that might have been exposed on a pipe, right? But there's plans to do construction in that whole area, so they would take on that at once, and that is what I thought everybody was trying to figure out, and in a thoughtful way, in a way that where whatever you agreed on was going to get enforced, right, with the resources that we had. So that's what I know, right, and that's why I bring it up publicly, right, because they're the answers that we need questions for. Mm-hmm. I don't know who has them at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the district does have those answers and the why to those. It is, and again, I'm not an elected official. I'm not a union member. I'm not a representative of the district. I've been doing this for a long time because I think these conditions really matter. I've lived in Philadelphia my whole life. This matters to me, and I think this is actually a fairly straightforward and easy problem to solve. It should be.
Yeah.
It really should be.
Well, maybe we all can get back on the same page, because it doesn't matter where you live, right? Mm-hmm. This is an important issue for everybody here in the city of Philadelphia and across the country, especially with how old our buildings are and how technology change and the upgrades that we need that are necessary to make sure that we are a smart city in every aspect, from technology to our ability for professional development to teach our kids and be mentors, and our children to learn and grow, because they need to have smart futures, or at least the option of smart futures with public education. So that's all I have. Does any other members of this committee have any questions on this bill? Any other members of or people from the public that are here joining us today wish to make any comment before we leave our hearing? All right. Well, thank you, Jerry, and all those who testify. There being no further questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify, I will ask if there's anyone else present, which I had done, that we failed to call, that wishes to testify on this bill. There being none, I want to thank you all and all the panels who participated today. We obviously value and encourage and invite all the important input that we have in all our hearings. Now I ask that you all please, other than council members, please disconnect from this meeting so we can go into our public meeting, and we will now pause the proceedings temporarily for a brief moment or two for multiple participants to leave the hearing. Mr. Frizzell, our clerk, you want to make sure a couple things. One, let me know when it's time to get back here, and two, want to make sure we have a quorum to proceed with our public hearing or meeting.
It appears most people have left now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. This concludes the public hearing of the committee, and we will now go into our public meeting to consider the actions to be taken on the bills that are here before us today. We will reconvene the meeting. Mr. Frizzell, who is our clerk, would you please read the call to take attendance for members so that our attendance clearly reflects that a quorum is present. Members, please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also say a few brief words in responding so your image will appear on our screen. Mr. Brazell.
Councilmember Alan Dom. Councilmember, you are muted, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues, and good job, Mr. Brazell.
Councilmember Mark Squilla.
Good afternoon, present.
Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson. Councilmember David O.
Good afternoon, Chairman and colleagues. I'm present.
Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr. and Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
That's back to you, Chairman Heenan.
Okay, let the record reflect that Councilman Bobby Heenan is present for the purposes of this roll call. I'd like to just remind the committee that at the request of the sponsor, which is myself, Bill number 210674 and Bill number 210775 will be held in committee to the call of the chair, and we will be looking to schedule another hearing soon on those bills. Councilmember Dom, I'd like to recognize you on an amendment to Bill number 210674.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I offer an amendment to Bill number 210685. A copy of the amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee. I move the amendment to Bill number 210685 be approved.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second that the amendment to Bill number 210674 be approved. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Chair recognizes Councilmember Dom for Bill number 210685 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 21685 be reported from this committee as amended with a favorable recommendation, and further move the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second Bill number 210685 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. It has been moved and properly second. Bill number 210685 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. This will conclude the business before us in the Committee of License and Inspections, and thank you all for your attendance here today in addressing these important issues. Have a great day and be safe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councilmember Green.